You're joining us here in Westgate Pop-Up Market on the first floor. Before we get going, I'm going to tell you why we're here. I'm sure you've seen the posters. We're here today to have a conversation around fatherhood. But before we do that, I just want to shout out all the sponsors that are making this possible. That is obviously the Westgate Pop-Up Market, as I mentioned. There's Quinn Peaks, who's provided us with this amazing furniture. We also have Spring Valley Coffee, and we have Faisal and Hugo Boss. Westgate Mall is open from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. daily, and the restaurants open from 7 a.m. and close at 7 p.m. daily. So as we mentioned, we're going to have a conversation about fatherhood, and if you want to be part of the conversation on social media, simply use the hashtag fatherhoodconversations. As you can see, I'm joined with two gentlemen here on my right and left. We have Mike Wachira, who is a radio host and a human rights lawyer. And we have Mwongera, I told you I'd mess it up. Mwongera Mutiga, who is an entrepreneur and a parenting coach. Welcome, gents.
Thank you.
So, as you can see, there's three men here, and there's only two beards, which means that one of us is not a father. However, two of us are. So, just for some context, guys, I would like you to tell us, I think we just got a bit of technical difficulty.
Yeah, let me see if I can.
You're in?
1, 2.
We'll start with you. Okay, so yeah, I've mentioned your qualifications of your beards, but now you can tell us how many children you do have and how long you've been a father for the guys.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks to Westgate for all of this. My wife and I have 3 kids. Been a dad since 2008, so it's going on 12 years now, almost 12 years now.
12 years, wow,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
And Mike, yourself?
Can you hear me?
We're in, okay.
All right, great. Been a dad, 10 years now?
10 years.
10 years, yeah, my son
Okay.
is 9. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so been a dad 10 years. And it's the most fantastic journey ever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for me, this is my highest calling in life.
Yeah.
To be a dad,
Yeah. So it's safe to say you're both qualified to talk about this subject. So personally, I'm really excited actually today to learn, as well as the guys watching. As a guy that wants to be a dad in the future, I'm here for selfish reasons to get all the information that I can today. So the first thing I want to kick off with is, as you've mentioned, your modern dads, your 21st century dads. And I want to talk about traditions of fatherhood. And there's some traditions I think that should never go, such as dad jokes. I think that's one that should never go. But maybe there's some that maybe should be, phased out. So I want to hear your opinion on that. I'll give an example. For instance, I grew up in London, and one of my favorite memories is driving past a massive park that's in London. It's called Hyde Park. And my dad would always say that he can't find the park because it's called Hyde Park, yeah. So dad jokes 100% are stuff that should go forward. But I would like to know for you guys, what have you brought from your upbringing, from what your fathers taught you? What have you kept behind? What have you kept and what have you left behind? We'll start with you, Mike.
I think for me, one of my earliest, fondest memories of dad was just him coming home, and you'd be like, "What have you brought? What have you brought for me?"
Yeah.
And you always had, because he worked at the airport.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad passed away when I was 14.
Right.
But he worked at the airport as a civil engineer. So there are these shops at the airport where he'd buy all these snacks and little things.
Duty free.
So duty free stuff, right? So he'd come home and be like, "Oh, some cakes, some snacks, this and that, the other."
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. And I think that for me was always something that you're like, "Oh, dad has come home, so there's always something." My other memory was were of just going places with him, And it didn't even have to be somewhere where we were going to spend money or anything. It could just be on one of his errands that he's running or something. And spending that time with him while doing that was something that was, really, truly, was awesome.
So quality time.
Yeah, quality time. My
Yeah.
dad was also an amazing cook. Shout out, Mom, I love you, but
You tip that one.
my dad was an amazing cook. So anytime he was in the kitchen, we'd be like,
going down.
yeah.
Yeah.
Then you look over the wall of the neighbors, you're like, "Can you smell that?
Yeah.
Something cook.
Yeah.
Something's about to happen." So I mean,
yeah.
those were the fondest memories of him. And I think those are the things that I've carried with me as a dad, because I know how those were memories that really fulfilled me and made me happy. And so I want my son to feel the same way and experience the same kind of happiness that I experienced just spending time with my dad.
Yeah, yeah. And cooking, how are you with the cooking? Yeah.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. And yourself?
Yeah, I mean, cooking was never a thing for me. I don't know how to cook, to be honest. But my dad, God bless him, is still alive. He's very involved in my life, and that's one thing I remember from him. He's the kind of dad who would always want to know what's up with you. He'd sit you down and ask you like hard questions. How is this going? What's happening in your life? And he'd dig past the usual chit chat, top surface stuff. He played his provision role pretty well. But in addition to that, he was very involved, very hands-on. Okay. My dad is a vet.
Oh, wow.
So I grew up on a farm.
Nice.
A small farm, but it was a farm. I mean, we had a whole chickens and dogs and cows and goats at some point, and there was even plants around somewhere. So I learned from him just the value of animals and how animals can add value to life, and just a passion for that kind of thing, for dogs and stuff like that. So this is something that I learned from my dad. I don't know if I've passed that on very well to my kids, but I remember that with him. There's that tradition. One of the other traditions we used to have is dad is big on ceremony. So he'd be like, if we're going to have dinner, there has to be ceremony to it. It's not just sit and eat or serve yourselves and eat. There would be a sense of we come together, sit at the table, and we have a big ceremony. Any event that we would have as kids, birthdays, etc., there was a sense of ceremony around it. And until today, that's how he is. Everywhere we go, whenever there's a function somewhere, dad is the guy who's called upon to proceed or to carry the proceedings. So I learned from him the value of ceremony and doing things in a big way, making a big deal out of even the small things, because then it shows how important those things are. And we try to do that at home as well. Small things. You finish school or you have midterm, and you make it a big ceremony because it shows that this is something important for the kids. So I've learned that from my dad, among other things.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys have had very fortunate upbringings. I'm very lucky myself, but I'm curious to know. Those were the good. What would you say, because now we're living in a very different world to maybe when you were growing up, what have you left behind, maybe that was going on back when you were a child, that you can't really bring into this 21st century?
I don't know. For me, there's not much in terms of because when you're a kid, and especially a boy, your dad is the first role model that you have. So dad can do no wrong. Except when he's punishing you. But other than that, I mean, for me, I don't really have any negative experiences, because my dad was a very present father. He was there all the time, as long as I can remember. The image I have of my dad was coming home by 6, and why I know this is because there was a program called Sundowner. If you're that age, then you know. So I know by the time Sundowner is starting, dad is home. So. I mean, so for me, those are the things that I carry around. I don't really have I don't think I have any negative experience that I can talk about that I would want to leave behind. Yeah. For me, it's, even at that point when we were being disciplined for doing things, when you think about it in hindsight now that I'm a parent, I'm like, that was important, because had he not done that, certain things would have spiraled out of control. So for me, those are the kind of lessons that I carry with me even until today. I mean, in terms of being a 21st, heading 22nd century parent, the way we discipline children is a bit different. You want to be friends with your kids, but then you also want to maintain a certain line to be sure that they understand that you can be friends with them, but there is no question that you are the parent and they are the child.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, and we had kind of touched on this briefly just before this prep. So I have an older brother, and we sometimes have this conversation about how well we were prepared for life as we know it. I think we had a very sheltered childhood, so there wasn't too much exposure to sort of the reality of life. The way there are people out there who are evil and people who are, want to put you down and stuff like that. So, you come into, say, a corporate space or, the workspace, and you encounter all these bad people who are trying to get you down, trying to mess you up. And I feel that we were not adequately prepared for that. So some of this stuff we're learning now as adults, and we're trying to deal with the politics of a workplace, for example, and stuff like that. And, I don't know if dad knew that was going to happen to us, but I feel like we were not adequately prepared for that. And we've learned along the way, that's just how life is. But if there's anything negative I'd say about my child bringing is that, that we were sheltered and we didn't really have that exposure to what life really is. And I hope that, without throwing my kids out into the crocodiles, that we can help them understand the reality of life. That not everybody cares, not everybody has your best interest at heart. Some people want to mess you up, and you have to be aware of that and prepare for that. So I think that's probably one thing I would say is part of my upbringing.
Yeah, I think just also to add on to that, and I can understand now being a parent and living in this world that we live in, that there's so much ugliness out there in the world, And the question then becomes, when do you begin to expose your children to the reality of the ugliness that is in this world? As a parent, you want your children to be happy. You want your children to have a memorable childhood. You don't want, when your kids are older, when they reflect back to their childhood, they're thinking about all the negative things that they saw. Because a childhood is something that a lot of people fall back on, and memories of your childhood are things that a lot of people fall back on during hard times as adults. You want to fall back and say, when I was a kid, my dad used to take me here, and my mom used to do this, we used to do this and that, the other. And those are sort of things that center you and bring you back to a place of peace. And for people who don't have that, they really struggle even as adults. Because when you're trying to fall back to a place that, and a memory that brought you peace, if you don't have that, then it's, you don't have anything that sort of grounds you or brings you back to a center or anchors you. And so I can understand for parents why they would want to shield their children from the ugliness that's out there in the world. But that being said, I think it's important for parents to be able, and like Mwongera is saying, it's important for parents to be able to know when to begin to introduce their children in an age-appropriate way to the realities of life. Now again, you don't want to traumatize them by,
exactly.
just
here's everything,
throwing them into the deep end and saying, this is what life is. Swim. No, but you want them to know that, first of all, you want them to understand the privilege they have growing up the way they're growing up. That not everybody is living the way you're wrong, and they shouldn't be doing that. And it was like, okay, so why didn't that policeman there stop him? And then I started realizing that I was making excuses for other people's bad behavior. And for me, I was like, no, I have to stop that. I have to, show him what the reality is. And the reality is that we live in a world where people are very selfish. People put themselves ahead of everybody else. And sometimes that can also have repercussions for the people who are around you. So for example, if that city hopper had hit somebody who was crossing the road, they would have killed somebody. And by the policeman not arresting or stopping that bus, he effectively would have failed to protect somebody else's life. So I'm trying to get him to understand that actions have consequences, and that the consequence may not be to you individually, it could be to the wider community that is around you.
Amazing, so again, we were talking off camera, and I was asking you guys the question of, when do you wait for a child to come to you with the tough questions of life, or do you sort of go ahead of them and say, I'm going to sit you down and tell you about this? There's several examples, but you mentioned how you approach this. I think it was quite unique, if you could share that.
Sure. I mean, I think, as parents, we have the benefit of hindsight, that we know the things that we know. Some of it we learn from experience. And I think being able to look back and say, I learned this either too late or I didn't learn this at all, gives us sort of a guideline on when is the best time to introduce some of these topics. I think what we're talking about was the issue of sex. If we can go there. Is this show, are we allowed to use that word?
I think so.
I don't know. Just what does it mean when you talk about that issue? And when do you introduce some of those topics to children, at what ages? And there are different approaches to it. I mean, we've tried to do it in a phased way. So starting from a really young age, 4 or 5 years old, we teach them about the concept of privacy. That, some things are private. So your private parts are private. Anything that's covered by your swimming trunks is private. Nobody else is supposed to see it. Nobody else is supposed to touch it. And if anybody does, then there are things that you should do. You should shout, should say no, there's certain things around that. And then graduating that to an older age, when now we actually have the actual sex talk, right? And it's, this is what sex is, this is how it happens, this is the name of the organs that are involved in this. And, just being very explicit about it, because we want them to hear it from us first, as parents, rather than hear it from somebody else out there. Because kids normally take the first source of information as the point of reference. So if they hear it from some kid somewhere, one of their friends who saw a porn video on their phone, then they're going to take that as the truth. And when you come now with the actual facts, they'll be like, I heard something else, so I'm not so sure about what you're telling me. So just the approach of being the first one to do it. And I think it needs to be done proactively, just address it. There are other heavy issues that we have to talk with our kids about. And I don't know if we're going to go into this here, but I think it's important to just be proactive. Just go out there and just tell them, this is what's happening, this is the reality of life, this is what happens. Because if they hear it from somebody else, then what you are telling them is secondhand information. They won't take it as seriously as they would if you gave it to them first. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important, and for you to be proactive, you have to be present. And we live in a time where I think our parents were not as busy as we are in this day and age. In this day and age, having one job may not be enough for you to be able to make ends meet.
Yeah.
And so what you're finding is that many people now are trying to supplement their income doing different things.
Yeah.
But what does that mean? It means it's taking away time from your family. It's taking away time from your actual presence at home. And even if you're at home, you may not be present. You're just physically there, but you're not present. So you're there with your laptop and trying to finish some assignment and responding to some emails or doing some research or something, and your child is there watching something on TV, and you're not very keen about what they're watching, and they hear something, and it's very hard. For kids, once they hear something, it's very hard to unhear that. And those are the things they will repeat when you're with people in public. And potentially embarrass you.
So they're waiting. They know what they're doing.
Such a funny story about that, but I'll tell you that.
And it's true. So and children are like sponges. They absorb information deeply and quickly, and it sticks. And so being a present parent is very important, because you first want to build a relationship with your child. And especially as us as men, as fathers, you want to be the kind of person who models your child's idea of masculinity and femininity. You want them to know that this is what it means to be a man, so that then when they're confronted with other toxic ideas about what it means to be a man, they have a point of reference to say, no, but wait, my dad told me being a man is this, but you're telling me it's this. And for me, I've seen my dad doing it. I've seen. Children don't learn by hearing, they learn by seeing. And so I've seen my dad do this. So for me, that's the point of reference I'm going with. This other thing, I don't think I want to get involved in that. That requires you to be a present parent.
I just want to pick up on that. I mean, there's a phrase that I've heard said that kids learn whether we teach or not. And that some of these values are caught rather than taught. So you might be proactively teaching them stuff, but how you model the life is even more important. And I like what you said, Mike, that kids are going to watch what you do, and they're going to do what you do, not necessarily what you say. You might say stuff and make instructions and lay the law down, but if you live in a way that's contrary to what you say, then they're going to follow what you do, not necessarily what you say. So kids learn whether we're teaching them or not, and it's important that we're proactive about it. Otherwise, they'll pick up all these things from different places.
Speaking about teaching, you'd mentioned that I saw you on social media talking about a social issue, and one of your questions was, where are these children learning these values? Where are these boys learning these values? So for maybe a young parent who's now in this weird space where there's technology, there's information, how are you bringing up a model man that can not turn into those people that are making uncomfortable situations, for example, women and things like that? How are those values being instilled just off the back of that videos?
I think like we said, children learn by observing, and so how I relate with his mom is how he's going to, that's his first point of reference, about how a man should relate with a woman, how a boy should relate with a girl. And that's his first point of reference. So for me, it's to model that behavior, so that when he looks at that, he's like, okay, violence against women is wrong. I never saw my dad do it. I never saw my dad treat my mom this way. So already he has got that moral anchor in him, and he has got a very strong point of reference where he's able to say, this is how a man should treat a woman and a boy should relate with a girl. But also the conversations that I have with him about how to engage with the opposite sex. It's important that we begin to, because those are the things that he will carry with him as he grows up. And then when he's confronted with the flawed ideas about masculinity, he has got something very strong to lean back on and say, no, I can't do that.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah.
So it's important for men to be able to understand that being in the life of your child, especially if you have a boy, is really important, because their ideas of masculinity come from what they see you doing.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we teach in our home is the concept of consent. That you know, a no is a no, and you know, if someone is not happy doing something simple like playing with you. So if my kids are playing a game and one of them doesn't want to play, and they say no, then that's a no. So just trying to inculcate the whole idea of consent, that I don't have to agree with what you're saying, and if I don't, then that's okay. And I'm hoping that, you know, over time, as my son gets older, he'll be able to incorporate some of those into his everyday, that a no is a no. And, you know, just because I really want this doesn't mean that somebody else has to agree with me. I think the idea of modeling that behavior is also important as well. And I think the thing about parenting is that, you know, we're not fully grown up ourselves. We're also learning, we're also growing as parents, as men. You know, there's stuff that I know now that I didn't know a month ago or a year ago. So there's a sense in which I am also morphing and growing as well. And it's important that I'm incorporating all these lessons that I'm learning into my fatherhood. You know, I think it's dangerous if we get stuck on, you know, this is how men behave, this is what we do, because then you don't learn. And when you learn, you grow. And when you grow, then you pass these on to your kids. Yeah. So I'm hoping that, you know, what we can do as men is understand that your life is not complete. You're still learning, you're still growing. There's still some ways for you to go. And as you grow and learn these lessons, you can be passing these on to your son. And more importantly is the nature of life, that you as a boy are also growing. And a point is going to come when you're going to need to pass this on to somebody else. So don't get stuck in your thinking. You know, be willing to change with new information. And I have to model that myself. Because if I don't, then I'm a hypocrite. I'm saying one thing, and he's going to do what I do, not what I say.
No, that's very true, and it sounds like you're doing an amazing job, if I might say so myself. So, just before we go forward, I want to let everybody know that's on the social media, that if they want to interact, they need to use the hashtag Fatherhood Conversations. If you have any questions that you want to pose to these guys, or any takes from what you've heard so far, then you can include those in the comment section. Just a quick shout out as well to the sponsors you can see behind us, which is Hugo Boss, also Imperial Armani, Grill Shack, which is available on the ground floor. As I mentioned, Quim Peaks and Springfield, the new clothing store just behind us has some amazing offers, especially for Father's Day coming up if you want to surprise him. So guys, you've mentioned a few times quality time. And as we mentioned, you guys are professionals, wear multiple hats. And also you've referenced the women in your life a few times as well. How are you structuring your family? Because I think maybe 20 years ago, it used to be very clear, you know, man, I go to work, woman, look after the emotional needs of your children. So how are you morphing into the new modern man, taking into account your what you're doing for work, and also your relationship with your wife, and how you're being able to navigate that as a whole group?
I think for me, the first thing is to be very deliberate about how I use my time.
Yeah.
You know, and understanding that my first priority is family. Everything else comes after that, you know. And so what I do, because I wear multiple hats, is to ensure that I try and maximize my day and try and arrange my hours in a way that when I finish work, I don't bring work home. That's one thing. If there's work that needs to be done, it will be done tomorrow, whatever has remained. I try not to bring work home. If I do bring work home, I have still make sure that I spend time with family. When they've gone to bed, now I can continue work. But I have to make sure that there is that time that I give to them, and especially my son. And so the other thing that I try to do is to get him to understand, what does daddy do? So I take him along to, he's been with me on radio.
Oh wow, really?
I've brought him
see
to the
him
studio.
working,
He has seen me at the radio station. He knows, okay, when dad says he's going to work on the radio, this is what he's going to do. When, you know, my other job at the NGO I work, I've taken him there as well. So, you know, he has an understanding that dad does this, dad does that, and sometimes when he's away, this is what he's doing. So it's important for him to be able to visualize and understand that. But then I also make sure that I drop my son in school every morning. And the reason I do that is because I want to be in touch with what he's learning. I want to be in touch with who his friends are. So when he comes home and says, oh, you know, so-and-so did this, or so-and-so told me, I can picture who he's talking about.
Exactly, and advise as well, right, on that.
Yeah. And exactly, and I know all his teachers, I know everyone in his class, I know who he plays with, I know who does what.
Amazing.
So I'm very, very aware.
Yeah.
And there is, and so I want to be in his life that way, so that when he's talking to me, so that he feels free to be able to come and talk to me about things.
Yeah.
And he knows I'll understand. When he says, oh, somebody did this, he knows I understand what and who he's talking about.
Yeah.
You know. And the reason why I try and make those hours available is because if you try and calculate how many hours as a parent you spend with your children, you'll be really shocked. In any ordinary working day, your child will probably wake up maybe at 6 to get ready for school. You're also getting ready for work. If you're not dropping your child in school, you're probably going to see them for 15 minutes. You'll be out working and come back maybe at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock. Your child may be asleep by that point, and which you missed. Or if they're not, you're maximum going to have 20 minutes with them. So that's 35 minutes in a day you spent with your kid. Okay? Do you know how ridiculous that is? It's 35 minutes you spent with the kid. You know, if you calculate that throughout the week, you probably have not spent more than 24 hours with your child in a week. So where are they learning their values from?
Out there.
You know, it's out there. And so as parents, that's why I say we need to be present. Like for me, it's very difficult to get me over the weekends to do anything. Because weekends I completely block off. I'm like, you cannot get me on weekends. If you want anything to do with me, get me on a weekday.
Wow, that's incredible. And I'm going to come to you. We have to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back. You can have a little think about your answer as well. But yeah, if you want to get involved, the hashtag is Fatherhood Conversations, and we'll be answering your questions at the end. Thank you.
There's a new hangout spot in town, and it is East Africa's first ultra-modern market. Come over to Nairobi's premier shopping mall and experience the Westgate pop-up market that is home to over 45 vibrant made-in-Kenya brands, including daily entertainment. Open 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Follow our social media pages for updates on exciting events, deals, discounts, and random giveaways. Karibu to Westgate Pop-Up Market.